Hi, welcome everyone. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, great, wonderful. Okay, so I am the co-facilitator for the Breakout Room 2. My name is Melissa Hossein, and I'm coming to you from the Sioux Valley Dakota Nation in southern Manitoba, former AFN staff member who used to work on this file back in 2019. And I recall visiting your region at that time, and I believe we were meeting in Vancouver. And so it's good to be back and here leading you in the discussion item. So we heard the background of how things have come to where we are now. You heard the expert videos from Danica and Amanda, and that opens it up for discussion now on the question as was just stated here, and to consider your perspectives on this proposed legislation. So it's open now for discussion, as the question is stated there. Should this legislation characterize First Nations water rights in direct or aspirational form in the preamble of the document, or the legislation, sorry, and then including a strong non-derogation on an abrogation of rights clause in the body of the legislation? So it's open now for some of your thoughts and discussion on this. I see we have a number of leadership in the room, Public Works, different a couple of water operators. So we should have some really good perspective. Does anybody want to jump right in and provide some thoughts? And I don't have Bing with me today to start having some of this discussion right off the hop.
Hi there.
Hello.
Sorry, I just missed what you were talking about. I took a phone call,
yeah.
Can you?
Yeah, we're looking at. Yeah, we're looking at the first discussion item is on rights and responsibilities to provide safe drinking water. And so the question for this one here is, again, should the new legislation characterize First Nations water rights in a direct or aspirational form in the preamble, and then also include a strong non-derogation and non-abrogation of rights clause in the body, and have no mention of what Crown rights are? So that's open for your perspective on that. And then previously to this slide here, Delaney had explained back in 2019 the three options that were open for consideration. And the one that was most favored across all the regions was this one. And again, it's to have some more feedback from the regions on this specific option here.
Okay, thank you. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Michelle Edwards. I'm chief of the Shekelwashin Kikaitan community in the Statlian Nation, surrounded by water. Don't have really great access to it. We did at one time until INAC stepped in and took our license away, and actually now we have 3 on a canal, but not the actual freshwater creek that runs through the middle of my community. So I'm not so familiar about what goes into a preamble, or how we're developing legislation. I do know that we need to be very assertive and direct in, I guess, like you're saying, aspirational in our wording for putting in a preamble about having the right to safe drinking water for all communities, just like the government gives industry the right to go in and harvest our resources. So I'm not sure how to go about that. I don't understand what should go in a preamble, and and what kind of words you're going to be looking for. If you're going to be looking for keywords that will drive the writers to actually get what we're saying and put it down in writing. So I think, you know, I mean, that's always, I think, the hard part, is that we're asked some of these things without really understanding what should go in that. I honestly believe that industry should be contributing to our safe drinking water, just like hydro wants to come in and, you know, do work in my community. Well, if I have a plan, they actually need to top up my plan, you know. So and I think that's what every community and government should be, I guess, legislating. That if industry wants to come in and use our resources, then they need to be contributing to our infrastructure, right? And if they don't, then they don't have full access to any of those resources that are out there until they make that commitment. You know, if hydro wants to be, you know, making $60 billion in a Statlium territory, selling, you know, water and then divert it, just like, you know, give it away, they need to actually be coming in and asking us what it is that we need in our community. Not just money. I think they're more susceptible to actually, if there's infrastructure that you need in your community, I feel that they would make that contribution. Money is never a good thing to give to a community unless you have a plan for it up front, or else it just becomes a big fight. And I know that personally because we settled with BC Hydro, and a lot of it was a cash settlement and some opportunities where now that in hindsight, the implementation would have worked a lot better if we talked about what it is that we needed in our community and what we were building and what we could provide for. Right. So I think those are the types of things that need to be thought of when we have industry coming directly and benefiting from these resources that is legislated, that they provide infrastructure, what is needed. And when it's all whole and we're drinking safe water, you know, then they can proceed because they make a whole ton of money, right? And they benefit, right? All we're asking for is a good, you know, cup of water. That's not too much to ask for, right? I mean, that's all we all want. So I'm just going to leave it at that, and I will continue to participate. But thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you, Chief Michelle. I appreciate that. And I guess, yeah, I mean, it is, the question is a little vague, again, because this area has not been scripted yet. Again, the preamble is not the actual in the document of the legislation itself. It's more the introductory piece, the component that goes. And when we were looking at those options that were presented back in 2009, the option 2 was characterizing those rights right within the body of the legislation. And again, there was pros and cons to that. The cons, you know, one of the main ones was that it creates legal precedent, crystallization of your rights and title. And in order for that not to happen, then there's this option here, which has a strong language on what First Nations rights are in the preamble, introducing it, but then having in the actual body of the legislation itself that it cannot, anything cannot derogate or abrogate from First Nations rights. So that was the other option for this one we're talking about right now. So again, nothing has been scripted yet, but it's just to lean to go, you know, which option would work best for First Nations for this legislation. Because I don't know how many are familiar with the current safe drinking water law. There was, again, Delaney had talked about a lot of the cons with this legislation, which was passed, but it hasn't really been formally enabled yet. It does include in there a clause within the body that if something is not done properly, it could open it up for possible abrogation or derogation if the First Nation is not able to provide safe drinking water. So that was a huge red flag in that existing body, which was one of the reasons why we are where we are now for the repeal and replacement of that act. So thank you for sharing that. I hope I provide a little bit of clarity on that. And the other options are, yeah, you can put the hand up or you can just jump right in. Yeah, go ahead,
Okay.
Katie.
I'm Katie. I'm from Kamloops. I work for Tk'emlúps-Te-Secwépemc. I'm a wastewater collections operator, actually. So not really on the water side yet, but we're kind of trying to move everything together and make like a utilities division where we look after everything. So in a sense, like I'm new to the politics and I haven't read any of the documents yet, but I will now that I know that they're there. But the thing that I kind of is a red flag to me is where's the mention of education and like the operators that are gonna maintain these systems, because the systems that we require are huge and they're very mechanical and scientific. So I'm not sure, I haven't read them, so I guess I'm asking the question, has there been mention of education?
That is actually, you're going to see that when we get to breakout session and the video talking about standards and regulations. You're going to hear a really good video presentation from Phil Tangi on that whole discussion with operators, with training, with certification. All those things will be towards the end of the day.
Gotcha. Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Because I see we're on a quick timer here, so I think we have less than 4 minutes left. And then I'm also have to encourage you before we close.
I think Krista
go ahead.
has her hand raised.
Okay, there we go. Hi, Krista, I recognize you. Hello.
Hi, it's been a while. So I just wanted to say that I think that what we're supposed to be talking about specifically is, do we want these terms kind of in the preamble for what we're going to be presenting? My opinion is strongly yes. I think that I don't know how many other people understand the languaging of this. Like, I literally did a Google search so I could get the definition of what these words actually mean. And essentially it's no matter whatever happens, they can't take away additional rights that are already there in law. So I think that I strongly agree with the fact that those need to be in there. I don't know if there's a way to also include something that says, like if there becomes a new law that is actually stronger and more robust, that would also take precedent as well. Like it would be something that would be integrated. I know with West Bank specifically, we were actually worded out of the new legislation for First Nations drinking water, because they actually said specifically about self-governing First Nations. So it was actually written to keep WFN out of it, because we actually have our own law. And our law essentially says we will meet or exceed provincial and federal legislation for drinking water quality. So I think that would be something that we should be looking at if we're looking at doing a First Nation, like across Canada, is something in there that also says that we will meet or exceed what the other standards are, because there is an unknown rule in the funding portion of ISK that actually requires First Nations communities to have properly certified water operators running their water and wastewater systems. So I just thought that I would put that out there, because not everybody knows that that's there, but it actually is. And it does get overlooked, and it is something that you can kind of use as a discussion topic when you're doing negotiations as well. That's my internal ISK knowledge. So
Okay. Okay, thank you for sharing that. Okay, so I'm being directed to go now to the mentee. So you can also provide some comments through this as well. Again, you can either, if you have your smartphone, you can hold it up to that little code there and it'll direct you right to it. Or if you're on your computer, you can go to mentee.com and enter the code that's listed on the page. And here again, you can answer the question through there as well. Again, do you agree with that new legislation? Again, I'm not going to read the whole thing. Just your thoughts on that. And then there's also an opportunity there through a word bubble to what are your biggest concerns regarding the inclusion of water rights in the new legislation. So there's an opportunity there to provide some feedback as well. And from the combined rooms, we will then, they'll share with you the combined results in the next, when we go back to the next room there. So we are closing in 35 seconds. So again, it's not the end of this discussion. There's an opportunity at the end of the day as well. It may give you time to think about it, that maybe in the roundtable you can share some thoughts there, or in the chat option as well. So I thank you very much for the quick discussion we just had, and then we'll be back again for the next one in water governance after they introduce the next agenda piece. So thank you. Okay, welcome back, everybody. So you just heard the introduction of the next session for water governance. And I don't know if I need to re-explain it, because I think Amy did a really good job, and so did the video talking about water governance. So I open it up for discussion, for your thoughts and feedback, again, on should this new legislation consider creating a high-level approach and structure for First Nations water governance? And then that's one part of it. And then the second option should be, should there be an opt-in approach for whatever is developed? And then that third piece is there is, should a water commission be explored? So kind of a three-part question for your feedback.
Personally,
Yeah, go ahead, Katie.
but just like about the opt-in approach, I would think that would be a good thing to have. You shouldn't be forced to participate in something that you don't believe in. As for the other parts, it's a long question, so that was the only thought I had.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody have any questions on this? Go ahead, Chief Joshua Charlton.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just wondering about the legislation. I'm new to the whole safe drinking water group discussion at the AFN level, but I'm just wondering if it's a provincial legislation that's being pushed, or is it a federal one? And
You know,
it is federal. Okay, and that brings up another question: is that what authority does the federal government actually have over the water rights in the province of BC?
whoa, that's a big question. Okay, so I don't know if I can answer that, but I guess that's something that we can pick for follow-up on that. Yeah, there's a whole, again, federal, provincial, jurisdictional question that needs to happen. But in terms of safe drinking water for communities, again, that's what this legislation is going to focus on, is in terms, it'll be federal legislation. But again, what will that look like? How will that be drafted and scripted, that framework of it, which is kind of where we're at, asking these questions on key points of that document. How should that be framed? And people's thoughts and ideas on that. So again, as Amy had talked about, for the water governance piece, the major part of that is, again, is how is that funding going to flow to the communities? Is it something that'll be, and then what would that, how would that be structured? Will it be at a national? Again, Maryland's video talked about different options and ways of looking at that, whether we keep it status quo in the way it is currently now, or do we look at new models that look at a regional, local, or a national approach, or a combination of what that could look like? Are there some things that could be looked at high level together, and then leaving room for regional and local discussion? Again, it's not scripted yet. That's why it's open for discussion. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up. So the fear that I have is that this is going to be a federal legislation, and with water rights, a lot of them you have to apply for through through the province. So I'm wondering if this legislation is more to give funding to First Nations to actually start securing safe drinking water with the individual province that the nation is in, or if it's an attempt from the federal government to actually take control over water rights in each of the provinces. So it kind of starts murking, I don't know, it just seems like there's too many working pieces between governments, because we all know that the provincial government doesn't talk to the federal government. They don't relay a lot of the things, and a lot of the destruction that is happening with all of the safe drinking water throughout Canada is all done under authorization from the actual individual province to the industries, and not the federal government.
So Melissa, if I can just jump in for a second, I think that I agree with what your perspective was, but this is actually coming from First Nations for First Nations. So it's not something that's actually coming from the federal government. It's something that the AFN is trying to push on our behalf instead of waiting to see what the feds are going to give to us. It's and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Melissa, but it's essentially AFN's response to the Water Act that they provided kind of forcibly upon First Nations. My concern with doing, I think there needs to be multiple structures of this, because there needs to be the high end, all encompassing, these are the rules that everybody follows. But then there needs to be substructures of it, because provincial waters have different aspects to them. So I think that each region needs to be able to kind of make those decisions for themselves. Just like the rules aren't the same for every province, I don't think that we should try and make the rules the same for every First Nation, because that's just really not possible. The water in BC is very different from the water in Ontario, where you pull it from, whether it's from a well or whether it's from a river or whether it's from a lake. And if you're up north or down south, all of those things make a difference. So I think that there does need to be a high level approach with the ability to make it more sustainable for each kind of area. And there may even need to be, instead of it just being by provincial regions, but actually by north and south regions as well, because a lot of the things that happen even in BC up north, those aren't the same effects that happen to the communities that are down south in BC. And so I think that we just need to ensure that we're keeping it open enough for everybody to be able to participate and make decisions that make sense for their area.
Okay, so I've heard a little bit of some national and then opportunity for regional and local needs based on community. If I could go back to Chief Joshua Charleston. So again, as mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, the Safe Drinking Water for First Nation Act, which was put in place in 2013, was to establish regulations for First Nations water and wastewater on reserve in lieu, because there is none. Right now, we all follow the Canadian Drinking Water Guidelines, and most cases, First Nations across Canada are following the existing provincial regulations and standards. This, again, that legislation that was put in place did a little more than what it was scripted in terms of the title is to do, and it actually put in increased liability in communities, didn't provide any additional funding. There was a whole number of things that were wrong with that, which is why the whole process has been to repeal and replace with something that's driven and meets the needs of First Nations. So that's where we are at with that. And it's now, how would that look? So in terms of the way this is, they picked 5 key areas that were talked about back in 2019. Again, it's coming back to those for further refinement and discussion on. So there's it's all broken up. So as we're looking at this one here, and again, it's looking at that water governance structure. Again, not something that's currently in place, but if there was to be one developed, what would that look like, and how would that benefit the communities, right? Versus what's in place right now.
Why, Chief Bonnie Jacobson, Upper Smokemean. Just wondering, could it be possibly modeled after the First Nations Health Authority? Because BC is ahead of that structure as far as First Nations health is concerned, and the rest of Canada is not taking up that line. So BC is kind of separate in that aspect. And could it not be set up a model similar to or close to what First Nations Health Authority is doing and have it fall under that umbrella? Just a thought.
No, that's fine. And it's also understanding that every region has different ways of how they work and conduct. And again, it's to respect any of those processes that are happening right now. And if something's working for a region, then how would that look? So your message there will be noted for this. And then also keeping in mind too, as an example, in the Atlantic, they're forming the First Nations Water Authority. So again, it's looking at different ways, again, what would work best for the community. Derek, go ahead. We can't hear you. No, no sound. Yeah, a little bit.
Okay, I have to talk closer.
No.
Oh, you can't hear me?
It almost sounds. Well, now we can hear you. You got to go a little bit louder.
Okay,
Oh dear.
Okay, I don't know if you can you hear me or not? Yeah. Well, anyways, I'm a small water systems operator, and I'm just wondering, like, if this goes into effect, will the government change their legislation to water then as well? Because, like, if we make a decision to change our water base to make it safe for less people go into those areas, and like, wouldn't I'm sorry to say like this, like the white Caucasian government, would they have to change their whole plan just for us to change ours? Right?
Oh dear, I don't know if I caught all of that. You're cutting out, in and out. I caught part of that. Could I encourage you to put your comment into the chat option?
Can you hear me now?
Be noted. Yes. Very
Can you hear me better now?
Yes.
Okay. Well, like, I'm just saying, like, if we have to if we're changing our way, wouldn't the government, the Caucasian, the white government, however we want to say it, Canada's government, wouldn't they have to change their whole legislation for us to change ours?
No.
Then how are we going to be able to make a committee of some type like this if we're not looking at the bigger factor and we're just looking at ourselves?
Okay, so again, this is something that's going to be developed through a joint working group between the federal government and with the chiefs. There's some chiefs that will be appointed to this working group, in addition to, I believe, some other experts from both sides. Again, it'll be co-developed. And I understand there's already been, the provinces are aware of this already, and the territories. So again, it's developing a model and then working with, again, each of those jurisdictions on how it would best fit. So that's where things are at. Okay, I'm not sure.
I think it's also important just to understand that right now there is a gap when it comes to First Nation drinking water. So although through our certifications we follow what the provincial regulation is, there isn't actually a law that enforces us to do that as water purveyors on reserve. So essentially what this is trying to close that gap of regulation versus non-regulation. And so Derek, when you asked would they change, they wouldn't actually change their rules. We're just actually building our own rules, because right now it's kind of an option to follow them it's not a legal requirement right now. It is, I don't know if you were in the previous breakout with me earlier, but there kind of the way they make us follow the rules is by linking that to our funding, but there is no actual law that makes us have to follow it as First Nations. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Krista, for adding that. I don't know. I see a few other people on this. I don't want to call out names, but
So we just have under 5 minutes left.
We have under 5 minutes. Okay. Again, it's open for discussion. I don't know who else is on. I just see one other video on. Avery Gravel. Are you interested in providing some thoughts or comments? Not. Oh, he's saying kind of, sort of.
In governments, like there would be like an election. Who would vote on that? The nations or the people of the nations?
For the actual legislation itself, it's actually something that would go through an actual federal process. And I think in the beginning of our presentation this morning, Delaney had talked about that process of how legislation gets through and is passed. So it actually go through the federal government process. So it'll be whatever's drafted in this framework, whatever's drafted this it will go through what's called a memorandum to cabinet, an MC process. And that is, again, going to be jointly developed between both federal and First Nation joint working group level. It then goes forward for introduction of a bill, and then it's voted on by the members of parliament. If it's approved at that level, then it goes over again next to the Senate for final approval, and then it gets passed by into royal assent. So there's a whole process involved that when it gets to that level. So essentially, it'll be, I guess, passed by cabinet. Does that make sense?
It does.
Go ahead. Yes.
It does.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I see a hand up, John Peters.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to make a comment because I actually deal with the Coquitlam watershed, and my Councillor John Peters from Coquitlam First Nations, and I want to thank everyone for just hearing me out. Like I deal with the federal government, provincial, and the municipalities within my own territory. So, and that's the thing, I'm like stuck in a unique situation because we tried to re-engage the WUP, or water use planning, just for my territory alone. Some of the work that we're doing with the government, and that's the thing is like I've been struggling for 6 years to acquire a service agreement for one of my IRs. I have one for one IR, which is in the city of Coquitlam, and the one I'm struggling for is in the municipality of Port Coquitlam. And they keep preaching reconciliation and everything else, and then I struggle with it because I bring a lot to the table. Historically, I had a family on every creek within my territory. So, and I just were able to acquire services just for my IR1 just 20 years ago. And I'm an urban First Nation. So it's frustrating, like trying to work with these people at the higher level and trying to just provide essential services just to the Coquitlam people, because I'm responsible for 114 lives that are left. And then I'm also, the way my nation was colonized was within the floodplain. So it's hard for me as an urban First Nations to build that capacity when I can't even access the water to help me gain the capacity, or just thinking outside the box and trying to create our own safe drinking water just to resolve a historical grievance where my nation or IRs have been incorporated in the Daikin system to protect everyone to enjoy these this just essential service like water. So like I'm at the highest level in regards to watershed, and we're doing a lot of good work, but it's just frustrating because I just can't build the capacity enough just to be a bigger player within in my own watershed. And it bothers me because they want to work, the federal government, the province want to work with us to send water from BC all the way to the States, but I just can't get enough water just to provide to the Coquitlam people, just to enjoy the services like everyone else has for like the last 150 years. But I just wanted to make that comment.
No, and thank you for sharing that, because it is definitely something that will be recorded and noted, because there are unique jurisdictional issues and challenges that have to be addressed, and how would those be addressed within this legislation? So thank you for sharing that. Oh, we are being now going to, I encourage you now, if you want, and it's also still open for a quick discussion, for your final thoughts or feedback on this topic here before we go into lunch. Again, there's an option here to provide your thoughts and ideas. With these, there's 3 questions within this one here, and again, you know, with that new legislation, what would that look like? Creating that high-level approach and structure. And then the second question there, should a water commission be explored? And then the third question, should governance pursue an opt-in approach? And again, we heard one person state, yes, that it should be an option for First Nations. Again, when ready, when they have the capacity, when, you know, there could be a number of factors involved in that discussion. So I encourage you to fill that out. Are there any other ideas or thoughts on this issue? Hi, everybody. Welcome back. So, yes, the next discussion is on transboundary governance. And again, we just heard the expert video from Teresa McClanahan. Talked about some of the key things that she had talked about were watershed-based approach, a basin-wide effort, and a multi-barrier approach. And so she talked there about some different examples of why that would be important. And so thinking about the video and the discussion item of transboundary, what are your thoughts with regards to new legislation? And should it clearly set out First Nations jurisdiction to protect source water off reserve? Who would like to start off the discussion today? Welcome, Bing. We missed you earlier.
Good to be back at the executive committee meeting. I had to attend.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Oh, we lost Krista. Krista had to leave. Oh, I see Robin. Robin, go ahead.
Thank you. Welcome. Nice to see you all again. So I really, for me, what resonated within the presentation, Teresa's presentation, was a focus on the source water protection and multi-barrier approach. Yeah, we get tunnel vision sometimes on, drinking water in of itself, but I think it's important to consider, what it's the longer view, right? We're thinking of the 7 generations. So while treatment and treated water is one method to provide people with clean and safe drinking water, in my view, unfortunately, it's a Band-Aid. And I think we lose sight of the bigger picture because it's not just about people, it's about, all life that relies on that water. And I also, I don't, it might be a hot potato, but something that I personally experienced working with Fletching and you know, working through the Indigenous Services Canada process to get a water treatment facility is the concern that, you know, they're reaching out to consultants and engineers are in the business of engineering. No big surprise there. And so treating water is to their benefit financially. And there's a bit of, you know, there were challenges, I think, with pursuing, you know, just kind of going down, okay, let's go for this water treatment plant. And I'm sure there's other aspects to the story that I'm just not aware of, but, you know, something didn't, it just doesn't smell right. Having financial oversight and, you know, working with engineering companies and where does it leave, you know, the direction to and emphasis towards clean and a protecting water source. It's about treating it instead. And I worry that shifts resources and capacity and the bigger picture. You know, it's always, there's a maintenance requirement in that regard rather than actually, you know, treating the land and water with the respect it deserves. Thank you, Coach Tim.
Thank you, Robin, for sharing your feedback. Is there anybody else that would like to weigh in on this discussion item for today? Hard to tell. Nobody has their videos on. I don't know if Chief Michelle is back. Oh, I see John Peters join as well. Greg. Go ahead, Greg.
Hi. Yeah, no, great conversations going on here, right? I love it all here. It's really good. Yeah, at Highbar here, that's one of our main focuses right now is actually the forest industries, who our first number one target is right now. And just to give everybody a quick example of how important it is for us to protect water, is that recently we'd asked a major forestry proponent about their watershed assessment, and they were kind of taken back, and you know, they are required for every activity on the landscape, and they finally said, yeah, you know, we don't actually have one. And I was like, okay. So then they got an email from their hydrologist consultant, and he'd said, yeah, no, it's all good. They gave me some data, it's all good. And I was like, well, you know, an actual legitimate assessment has 13 categories of questions, including how many ditches or how many roads you have built, how many kilometers of roads, where's the water line. There's all these extensive questions that go into a water assessment, and the licensee didn't have it. And so thinking that this was going to be an over and done with process with the government, saying, hey, these guys don't even have the right assessments to keep going with their development. The government actually ended up trying to still facilitate that development there. And I was pretty baffled by, being a professional forester. Obviously, we're starting to cross some professional lines there, which we're going to definitely chase down here. But just to let everybody know, it is super important to watch the woods and ask the right questions. And through our group, the SRSS group, I don't know if anybody heard about it, Secwepemcúlecw Restoration Stewardship Society. Highbar created this, how do you call it, the referral guidelines that we're just trying to start pushing across the nation here, and everybody seems to be looking at it and really thinking about some of the critical questions that you should be asking during referrals. And a lot of times, a lot of the referral workers aren't professional foresters, and the managers aren't professional foresters either, right? So, so if you are in this Secwepemcúlecw, just yeah, keep an eye out for that. You will see it, or contact me there. But yeah, you know, that's all adding to the discussion that we're having today, protecting different parts of our water rights. So, thank you.
Thank you, Greg, for sharing that. Is there anybody else that has some thoughts they'd like to discuss with regards to Should the new legislation set out First Nations jurisdiction to protect source waters off reserve? And if so, what are your thoughts on that, and what is your approach?
Just my personal thoughts, because like I said before in the past engagement group, my nation deals with the watershed. My nation was colonized at the mouth of the Coquitlam River to the Fraser River, but my ancestral lands and my creation stories, my grassroots teachings come from the Coquitlam watershed. So it's very dear to me. My knowledge keeper, who's my peer, who's been doing this fight for 30 years, or even longer, he's been in and out of governance for my nation for over 30 years, and he's my knowledge keeper. And the importance of it just alone is like, if we were just involved like over 150 years ago when they put the dam up at the Coquitlam River, or Coquitlam Creek, as my past chief had said, and just his words alone at a time when the governments didn't want to even listen to First Nations. And he stated that if you put this dam up, you're basically taking food out of my cupboard, which the red fish used to spawn up there. So it's kind of bittersweet for me, like as a new leader, and doing this work with the governments on making decisions with them. Like I said before, we're part of the water use planning that started as recent as 30 years ago. And it's frustrating as me that they want to make all these changes. The government's taking resources out of the territory, such as gravel pits right underneath the dam. And like Robin says, there's a bigger picture here that affects, the water really affects everything. The way they dike the river, and like, my apologies, I'm really passionate about this, because just all the work alone that the government has done just for the greater good of the people in my nation, which is the Tri-Cities and such, my nation had suffered greatly. And then, like I said before, it's frustrating when they preach about reconciliation, and all this water that's coming from my ancestral lands is being diverted around my own nation, which I still haven't been able to provide essential services for one of my IRs, and we're an urban First Nation. So it's frustrating to hear that these decisions are being made for drinking water to be provided to the states. And so I really am for protecting the waters outside of our own nations, because, like I said, where all this fresh water is coming from is my ancestral lands. And just because I was colonized, where the government had seen us when we were occupying during the summer, is just it's just frustrating as a new leader. And just the way they dike the river and everything else, it's like a lot of historical grievances. And just because we're colonized, like all the work that they've done, they've been flooding my graveyard for hundreds of years, and I can go on, right? But I'm not here to say that, but I really strongly feel that it is important that these legislations are in there for us to protect those waters, and work with the governments as best as we can, not just to protect the drinking waters for generations to come, but to come to a better understanding on, because we've been stewards of the lands for over 8,000 years, just in my nation alone. So for them to do this work without our consultation or ideas or how to protect the water in itself, I just strongly feel that there should be more involvement from us as nations, especially in this regards to drinking water. But for the many other uses of it, like cultural, spirit bathing, and I can go on, because we're all unique in our own ways, right? But that personally, just being a nation that's given up our ancestral lands for a watershed, I really feel there should be more involvement, even earlier than, like I said, in my own unique situation, just as recent as 30 years ago. So that's all I wanted to have to add.
No, thank you for sharing that. And I recall your discussion from the previous one with regards to the challenges of even attaining clean water for some of your communities. Yeah. And the unique challenges around all the multi-jurisdictions. So those things need to be addressed and need to be recorded. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and that's all I wanted to add is just like, it's just frustrating that working with the federal government, the province, but a municipality has the power to prevent the Coquitlam First Nations to acquire essential services as simple as water. Like, I'm not here to protest or set up roadblocks just to get a water line just to my own nation when it's an urban's First Nations. And the rest of the Tri-Cities are enjoying these simple services, just clean water in homes for like the last 150 years. And I'm still struggling. And like I said, I just recently acquired services just for my IR1 as early as 20 years ago. So it's frustrating as a new leader.
Absolutely. Are there any others that would like to provide some thoughts or weigh in on this discussion on source water protection off reserve?
So we just have over 5 minutes left in this breakout room.
Oh, great, thank you. I can't see who's there. Oh, I see Chief Michelle Edwards.
Thank you. Can I ask a question more about the municipalities and how many are there that don't have safe drinking water, that doesn't have clean water? I think you got to start looking at the comparables. I know we're going to look at maybe connecting to the district just because we have a shortage of water, so I can't develop anymore because I don't have enough water. But even INAC in all their brilliance, you know, even asks about, if there's going to be any issues, working with the district. And they only ask me that because the scene behind me was me blockading them from putting in an actual water intake, which is on our reserve. So I think, when all this legislation is being looked into, there has to be a lot of fact checking about why municipalities do have. That is, because they think, they may be, better to borrow money, easier to access, maybe supplies or build their capacity. But in my opinion, they're not the brightest light bulbs out there all the time. Governments are very spoiled and they need to actually work for everything that they get, because they don't. I feel they're handed everything, where people think we get everything for free. Yeah, maybe, shit advice every now and then. That's something that we get for free, but I think it really needs to be looked at why municipalities have any type of authority over, the connection. Maybe we should have control of all infrastructure. I feel that's, that should be what we should actually be doing, because all these facilities were built, back in the early 1900s. So everything is deteriorating. We have 3 dams in my territory, like I was speaking to earlier, and because of Hydro's ignorance to not actually look after them, and I don't know who builds, billion-dollar assets and doesn't look after them. I mean, we certainly wouldn't, but when you have the funding, so they shouldn't be able to do that. We know everything has to be replaced probably right across Canada. And it's actually going to be us who will hurt, and it will be the taxpayers, get them all riled up about people not looking after their assets. If you do not look after them, you shouldn't actually be able to build them, right? And then, and I honestly feel that they're spoiled little brats when it comes to the government just handing them money, and then they look to us for support. Well, I'm going to quit giving my support to some of these people unless I'm speaking directly to the decision maker about, why they would give somebody $10 million when I have to struggle to get $1 million, right? So at some point, I don't even want their money, right? So we need to be generating our own revenue. And I feel infrastructure, the point of infrastructure, we should actually be building that and then distributing it. And, you know, they can actually come to us about that. And there's no reason we can't do that. Right? Everybody, you know, every trail when settlers got here came right to our community. And there's reasons for that, right? You know, Lillooet is surrounded by 5 First Nations communities, right? They're kind of blocked in, but yet they're the ones who have all the services. So I think when you're looking at legislating stuff, you have to really look at why the municipalities have any type of authority when it comes to working with us. If anything, they should be coming to us to get services. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that, Chief. Definitely need issues of equality. I hear that. Thank you. Oh, we're into a countdown now again. Okay. At this point here, we have about a minute to complete this survey for this portion. Again, you can use your phone on the QR code there, or you can go to the menti.com website and enter that code. And again, the discussion in this one here is, do you agree with us that the new legislation should assert First Nations jurisdiction to protect source waters off reserve? And then it goes into another question. Should First Nations jurisdiction be pursued at all costs in the new legislation, despite limitations that may be imposed by provinces and territories? Again, based on the discussion that we just finished here. And then there's a word bubble discussion here on what are your key concerns about transboundary jurisdiction considerations. So I think you can enter some multiple comments in that one. I don't know if Greg is still there, but Greg referenced a report. I wonder if he might be open to sharing that link to that report. Okay, welcome back, everybody. So our next topic is on financing. And again, you just heard the video from Kevin Page, who talked about the need to do things better this time around. That you can't legislate water without First Nations inclusion, that future legislation needed to be co-developed. It has to address funding shortfalls and to close the gaps, were some of the key messages we heard of that. But then being just shared models of asset management planning that look at the true costs of water and wastewater systems. So in its entirety. So that opens us up now for discussion on this issue. Again, for this new legislation, what, in creating a funding arrangement or mechanism, what would that look like? That defines, it's a big loaded question that's within there, but again, some of your feedback on that.
I have a question. So what can we finance? Like what kind of financing arrangements are in place already? It'd be nice, say, if you get $1.5 million to go towards building some infrastructure related to water, can you use that to leverage, if you can actually put together a plan with budgeting on maybe some revenues that you can collect in the future, creating service agreements with industry or business or even homeowners on your reserve. At some point, if only building our infrastructure is what, INAC or even the First Nations investment industry, whatever they're called. At some point, we, even in our communities, we have to start realizing there's a cost to provide services. And one is water, right? So how do you develop a funding mechanism even for, so we can leverage dollars to finance a lot of these builds? I don't know why when you get, I've asked the question before, and it was to build a tribal police office. If they're going to offer us $2 million to build it and it costs $3 million, why can't we actually take that financing arrangement to a lending facility and let them know that with a lease agreement with the province and the police that we'd collect revenues and then be able to actually build the full facility instead of only half of it, because that's normally what we all have to do. We have to build whatever we actually get in funding. It's never anything, you know, spectacular. And again, it goes back to the equality of, you can guarantee the District of Lillooet will probably get 80% more than we would on reserve, and we're just across the creek. You know, so it is that inequality, but definitely when it comes to financing, we should be able to leverage on dollars that are actually already going to be a contribution from the federal government. So I think that needs to really be looked at. We're a taxing authority here in Shekelwash, you know, but that's because the District of Lillooet has nowhere to build. So we're going to actually we'll provide that for them, but we're going to charge them, you know, to live in our community. And eventually that's where we have to get. We had very sophisticated economies at one time. So there's nothing wrong with going back into how we looked after our people and how they had to actually, we provided services, we provided health, we provided a well-being, we provided housing, we provided all those things, right? And there was a cost to doing business, and that's what we have to look at, is what is the cost of business. But eventually, even our community members need to understand that there's a cost to provide them service, you know, and if they want it upgraded, well, then we've got to figure out how to pay for it. Either it's developing our own economy or creating the legislation to say that every year there's going to be a certain amount of dollars that are going to be added to a fund for the replacement of facilities and infrastructure. So thank you.
Thanks, Chief. Michelle. Bing, were you going to say something?
Yeah, no, I just like what Chief Edwards just said about looking at leveraging funds that are coming to you, and also looking at you know, the cost of doing business, is being able to, and sometimes it's difficult to implement that in a community where there's not a lot of resources. But there's other ways of doing it. You know, we hear a lot more about resource revenue sharing. That many of the leadership saying, well, the have been utilizing our resources, and we have not been getting anything out of it. So that's one approach that's being talked about. But also being able to leverage the funds and have those partnerships with others, maybe external to the First Nations, setting up partners, and those are probably some that are willing to finance your projects because they're in the business of lending money. And if ISK can provide some of those startup costs, that can be utilized to set up those financing agreements. So I think more and more that we go across the country, there's innovative ways of utilizing the small amount of money that ISK gets. And our basic approach is to keep pressuring ISK to provide the right amount of money. And as he pointed out, be able to set aside, which is very important, set aside resources to repair that pump, which we know is going to fail or wear out sooner or later, hopefully. So, good points, Chief. Very much.
Did anybody else want to weigh in on this discussion?
The question is a tough one, I guess, a tough one to think about. And it's what can we embed in the legislation that will guarantee that there will be resources there. I think that's going to be one big area to work. I think the one thing that's going for us this time is that the previous Safe Drinking Water for First Nations Act was introduced in the Senate way back pre-2013. And bills introduced in the Senate do not have to show the resources to support that bill. And that's why we believe Harper government introduced it in the Senate. This time around, we are told that the new bill, the new legislation that will be co-developed and developed by First Nations for First Nations will be introduced in Parliament, in the House. And those bills have to show how that legislation is going to be funded. So that's a big difference between this time around. Last time it was government's imposition without consultation, without respect for water rights, treaty rights, inherent rights and all that, so that I think we have a good opportunity there to do it differently this time. But with your support and work across the country, we should be able to do it. Certainly you need leadership and technicians who know what it's like to try and operate a water plant, wastewater plant, wells without adequate funding.
That's the question again. It's, you know, I don't know if this was new legislation or even if they did it for the non-Indigenous, I guess you'd call them a nation, for across Canada, or is this new? You know, it's sad that this even has to be legislated, but you know, if it's going to, we should actually do it right and make it as powerful as we can for future generations. You know, because again, I think every one of us, you know, that is a leader in our community, understands what we need at the end of the day to provide services. And I'm sort of seeing all over that most municipalities, and again, most are probably surrounded by, you know, a Indigenous community, if not a nation, you know, and again, we need to be able to look at how do we put ourselves at the forefront of being that service provider. And, you know, and when I go onto the FNIP, no, maybe it's just FINI. It's not FNIP, it's just FINI. You know, trying to get them to a place where we are going to be the ones who are replacing infrastructure. We should be those professionals. You know, that could be our industry is, you know, infrastructure replacement and upgrades and new infrastructure. There's no reason we can't. You know, everything is, you know, everything's being resourced from the resources that they're taking off of our lands. You know, so there has to be some really strong voices when they're sitting with all of these, you know, middle managers at the table at the government level who are going to be dealing with developing the legislation. You know, and the funding portion of it, that's huge. You know, we're just replacing a dam here, and that's $1 billion upgrade, and that's ratepayers of BC who have to pay for that because the incompetence of BC Hydro to just kind of not look after assets. And, you know, and they're making money off of the water that my ancestors used, right? And, you know, now they try to hold it back, you know, contain it by a dam, and because they haven't looked after anything, they're releasing it and it's killing everything in its way. They're not even generating power, right? So they have that kind of authority, and we need to be able to go in and actually oversee that authority when it comes to water. So, you know, that even has to be financed. You know, a very structured committee oversight when it comes to water, how it's used, when it's released, when it's not released, how much you can actually use. There's no reason all that can't be put in there, because we know damn well industry will come along and, probably throw tantrums in front of government that it's theirs to use. Well, that was our water to use. We were doing quite well with it. And then for somebody to come along and just stop it and take all that use away from us, it's kind of hard to get over something like that. So this legislation needs to not only provide for us, provide for the future, provide for the non-Indigenous, but when it comes to financing, I think at some point we need to hold all the controls on that. And we finance industry, we finance government, we finance municipalities, that we're able to get that AAA credit rating. That's just something that, should be provided to us. Eventually that INAC, I guess in some ways they're okay when you need them, but for the most part, they're a hindrance, right? So we can see that they're trying to step back and they're going to give us that authority to do this. But if we can't manage it right, if it's not structured properly, then it's going to be a hard sell for our people, right? So I think, having this policy in place, where really when it comes to financing, really needs to be looked at and critiqued with a lot of oversight, a lot of professionals, but because that's a lot of money. When it comes to water, that's probably where the majority of the dollars are going to go, right? Because that's what's going to feed us, and that's what helps us grow our communities. Like I said, I can't grow my community, I can't build, because I don't have enough water, even though I'm surrounded by it, right? But I can't put my community members in a position where, if a fire starts, we don't even have enough water to fight a fire, right? So that kind of stops development right there, unless I had the money to actually go and add to it or build another reservoir. Right now we don't, we can save up for it, but those are just the things that we run into. So if I could have went somewhere to finance building a reservoir, I could be building my community. Right now I can't, I'm at a standstill. Thank you.
Well, I just wanted to add to that. I appreciate your words, Chief Edwards. It's like I said, in my unique situation, my negotiations with the municipality alone, it's been ongoing for 6 years. It got so bad where the municipality even wanted us to give up our rights and titles in regards to our own ancestral land just to get services. And so we came to a conclusion as leadership to even look into getting our own asset, like a water system for the nation. But you're absolutely right. The funding's not in place. ISK is great, but to a certain extent, but I just cannot finance a $12 million water asset just to provide the services to the Coquitlam Nation. And because I don't have access to these services, you're absolutely right. I can't create any kind of economic development. My IR1 is overhoused as it is, and I'm only on 7 acres. I'm responsible for 114 lives that are left of the Coquitlam Nation. So it's frustrating, that these fundings aren't in place. And like I said before, I'm just tired of asking for handouts and everything else just to provide to the Coquitlam Masteo or families just the services that everyone's been enjoying for the last 150 years. It's concerning for the future generations of my nation alone, and not just mine, but the neighbors, my neighbors as well, and brothers and cousins or whatever. And and our thoughts on gaining our own asset, we can help these other nations, because before I became councillor, I was pursuing to be a water operator just because of hearing the stories from one nation in the interior who worked on trying to get out of a boiling water advisory for 15 years, and they succeeded with all the work that they've been doing. So me being in Urban First Nations and seeing that kind of work, I just wanted to gain that experience to help other nations that need it. And then I didn't realize how important drinkable water is, or safe water, and especially for me as an urban First Nations, that I can't even provide that service to my own nation because I don't have a water system. I don't have access to any of that. And I can't even create enough funds just to have my own asset and maintain it, or even the manpower to do it. So in my situation, I would have to reach out to my brothers and sisters that are neighbors to me just to just help my own nation. But I'd love to extend that to my neighbors and families that I share the territory with. It's like just an unsaid thing from my teachings, from my knowledge keepers, like they're like this whole idea of boundaries and everything else. So like I'm very honored to be with everyone today, trying to find a solution for the future generations, because ultimately all the work that we're doing today we'll probably never see, but the future generations will benefit from this kind of work, right? So that's just my personal thoughts. Like I said, I'm in my own unique situation. I know we all have our own challenges, but I'm just tired of asking for a handout just to provide something as simple as fresh drinking water to the people that where this water is coming from, our ancestral lands. Like it's just, it's frustrating. And that's all I wanted to add.
Thank you for sharing. I see a countdown here. We got 20 seconds left in the room. I think we need to go to the poll again. There's 3 questions within there. Encourage you to fill that out, and the results of the combined rooms will be shown in the main plenary room. We go back. Okay, welcome back, everybody. So yeah, you just had a really good video from Phil Tangi talking about standards and regulations and his extensive experience with regards to that. And so now for discussion on this particular item here is really talking about, again, you know, should there be a definition of some national standards at a higher level? And should there be others that are developed at the local and regional development for standards and regulations? And if so, what might some of those be? Where could there be national and where could there be local and regional development? And the third piece to that is thinking about, you know, should there be an inclusion for First Nations culture laws and spiritual relationship with water being components on the development of those water standards? Some of your thoughts on that. So I'm going to open it up now for some feedback. Who would like to start? Do we have any water operators in our breakout room? Yeah, go ahead, Joshua.
Hi. I'm not a water operator, but I know water operators in our community. So I know it might be a little bit different than other communities, but we're on the west coast of Vancouver Island, a very remote community, about an hour and 15-minute boat ride to the nearest town. So that's our situation. And something that really resonated in the last presentation was the wage gap. It is absolutely terrible to see in our communities when we're talking about 2 individuals that have worked for us for probably 20, 30 years, taking care of our water and everything in our community. They've been at the same wage for probably the last 15 years. And it's just so disheartening because we wish that we can pay them more. We just don't have the funds internally to pay them more and give them more that they actually deserve. And there never seems to be any kind of incremental increases to any of our departments that actually take care of all of the infrastructure in our community. So I don't know if this could be more of a national standard or a regional standard, but I think that if it was a national standard, that there'd be some kind of wording in the legislation around providing increases, like to our actual workers. Because they're very committed and they take care of our needs within the community, and it's disheartening to be a leader and not being able to get it through people's heads that we need more funding so that we can give these guys a real living wage. It's quite expensive living where we are. Minimum to leave the village is $100, so it's not, and that's if you forget a bottle of ketchup at the closest grocery store. So so the $100 to go get a bottle of ketchup kind of thing, like it's quite expensive. So it would be nice to see that as a national standard, that our guys get paid properly.
Great, thank you. Are there any other thoughts or feedback on this? So we've heard already that there's definitely a need for ensuring wage parity for our water operators, water and wastewater operators across Canada, and for incremental funding. Bing, are you going to add to that?
Yeah, so we had a meeting with the RDGs on last Friday. We invited them to come and speak to us, to the Chiefs Committee on Housing and Infrastructure, about the new O&M funding that was announced last fall, and the new O&M funding that was announced in the fall economic statement by Minister Miller. There is, I would say, significant funding coming for water and wastewater O&M. But it's not enough. I mean, we always have to say, well, we say, great, thank you for adding more money for O&M. And apparently, they have sent out this year's funding by increasing the amounts. We get, everybody gets 80% of for water treatment plants for whatever fictitious number was drawn up 20 years ago. They are increasing that to 100%, but it's still a number that somebody came up with. And apparently that's been sent out. So I guess as a chief, you should be looking for a check in the mail or something. So that's supposed to be going out to all First Nations who are getting the contribution agreements with those funding amounts. And then they're going to be doing the same thing for 2021, 2022, starting next fiscal year, April. So there is money coming down the pipe. What always boggles my mind is we always hear leadership saying, we hear about it, but I don't see it. So, we know it's there. I would knock on their door, go to Vancouver and knock on the RDG's door saying, where's the money? Show me the money. So that's, and it's significant. It's a lot of money. Of course, it's over 634 First Nations in Canada, and it's always distributed, doesn't go that far. So that's what something we advocate for, and we got the RDGs to come in one place once, although it's virtual, but they did all show up, and they said, yes, we're putting that money out the door, and depending on how much you've been getting, it might not be a significant amount. The large First Nations, they have big budgets, they probably get a big chunk. So just I thought I'd bring that up. It's with the RDGs, and we did. I think probably what we could do, Melissa, we could share the deck that they provided that explains that. So it's already gone to the. So it's not secret. It's gone to the Chiefs Committee on Housing Infrastructure, and there's a chief represents every region and technicians. So it's not it wasn't blacked out or anything like that. It's available. Maybe we could share that. I think that would probably be a good thing to share.
Sorry, Irvine, where can I find that document?
Who is that?
It says test from Aspen. So just to share on the screen, where can I find it?
You won't find it. It's in my vault.
Oh, I see.
But maybe something that could be made available to add to that list of all the resources in the yeah. Okay.
Absolutely.
Maybe find it.
Yeah.
Okay.
If I was 50 years younger, I'd have just a few flicks of my fingers. I'd have that up already, but it's a little bit technologically challenged here. While you're talking, I'll look for it.
Okay, sounds good.
So we have just
over
over 10 minutes left.
Okay, sounds good. All right. Does anybody else want to provide some thoughts on this issue here? Thinking about, what could be some national standards and what would be some that would be left for local and regional. So we heard already an example of the national, and now the concept is thinking about what would be some of the local and regional standards that would be left for the regions to apply or develop that would be unique to your own regions. I don't know, is Katie there? I think Katie was also working in wastewater.
Hi. I just wanted to say thank you for the great day and information. Unfortunately, I do have to leave. It's 3:00 now. So,
okay.
But thank you guys for all the great information, and I think that I'll join in on tomorrow's session as well. Just to, but thank you.
For your feedback.
Have a good rest of your afternoon, everybody. True.
Okay, who haven't we heard from in our room? I haven't heard from Mark. Mark, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Hi, would you like to provide some thoughts or feedback on this issue?
Well, I'm a water operator for the Upper Smokemean Indian Band.
Okay.
And funding is one of the biggest problems we face, as others, as far as maintaining our water systems. And it seems like a lot of times leadership says a lot of things for us, and I know it's probably hard on their end to get answers, but yeah, it's just funding for us to actually do the job proper, to maintain the system properly. No money, nothing gets done.
Yeah.
So it turns out to be band-aids and stuff. And when it comes to water,
I think if you,
when it comes to water,
definitely.
We should have its full attention. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think if you recall and think back to the video of Bill, and he was talking, about the wage parity. He also talked about the issue of training and development of operator capacity. Are those some things that could be nationally driven, or are those something that would make more sense to be locally or regionally driven?
I would say we'd have to start local.
Mm-hmm.
We need more younger kids interested in this. we definitely need to start from the ground up, and that's right from the reserve here.
Mhm. So local level approach.
Yeah, that would probably be
Based on
more
the-
realistic to get any movement here.
And need for retention and recruitment, I'm assuming.
That's true.
Thank you for your feedback. Is there
Thank you.
anything else you'd like to share on?
I'm learning a lot.
Okay, I
Yeah.
appreciate it. Thank you.
And we're stronger together. And I believe all First Nation communities need to bind together. And we have to win this for the next generation.
Great.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Sure. Yeah.
I see Teresa on. Teresa, would you like to share some thoughts or feedback?
Hi, good afternoon. Sorry, I've been busy most of the day. We have no maintenance in our community right now, so we're currently, of course, searching, and just been a hectic time. So my name is Teresa Boyce. I'm the project manager for Housing and Public Works. John Peters was on here earlier. He's our water and wastewater operator, so it's really great to have him on board, and he's also the counselor of Coquitlam First Nation, so it's been great working with him. And I've been new into the role for about a year as the project manager for Housing and Public Works, and some of the challenges that I've found within coming into this role is a lot of the capacity development, training, finding operators, or even want the community to even want to train to be operators. Because for one, a lot of we're also in an urban area. So just, it's so challenging because, you need to create that interest, but how do you create that interest? We, being a smaller community, we don't have that many, right now we have an older population to a young population, which is more of like youth under 15. So we're, we're growing, but too, and then even the in between, like adults, some of them are not interested. So even trying to get them interested to go in some kind of trades is also challenging. And yeah, that's where some of my main challenges are now. And not only that, of course, like the mention of funding. So finding the funding for, even if we wanted to hire another person, it's having the time to actually do that search and finding that funding. Because there's so many different things that Housing and Public Works that we deal with on a day-to-day basis, and just being able to find those resources it just takes time, and learning more about those resources. As like I did mention, I'm new to this, and just making sure that it's that I'm educated for the community, to make sure that that we're not missing out, and that all of these opportunities are, that we make sure that the community is sharing in those opportunities. Yeah, that's where I've been for this past year. Oh, I know, policies, with policies in water and wastewater. So in the community, I don't believe we have those. And not only that, surrounding the emergency management plans around water and wastewater, because our lift station is currently in an area that can be potentially, could be flooded. So, that creates a problem for the community, because then that could be, contaminated, or, power off, then we don't have those functions. So even in an urban area, we still could find the resources, but still, it's still challenging on a, depending on what kind of circumstances come up with either storms or floods or so on. So yeah, that's my little bit of input for now. I wish I was able to attend more today to gain more knowledge from all of the people who are here today. And I'm really glad I've been able to participate, even though for a short time. And I'm going to try my best to be on tomorrow too. So thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. Appreciate it. Is there anybody else that would like to weigh in on this? We are coming down to the last 2 minutes, I believe, here. That wanted to talk a bit about the concept of a national standards, and then leaving some for development of local and regional. And then also that third piece is, the incorporation of First Nations culture within the development of water standards. So we are at that section here where I'm going to refer you to the Menti now. And then you can also answer the question within there as well. Again, there's good 2 questions within there. Again, do you agree that the new legislation should have some national standards and then leaving development for at the local and regional level? And then including the reference of First Nations culture, laws, and spirituality, with waters being important components of the development of water standards. And then there's a word bubble in there as well. Again, what are your key concerns about standards and regulations in the new legislation? So I encourage you to provide some feedback in that process as well. And again, we're going into, once we complete this session, we'll be going into the roundtable, and it is an opportunity there to add anything throughout that may have you thought about throughout the day, to include that in the final feedback. Yep, we are going into the final countdown now. So thank you again, everyone. Unless you have anything burning you'd like to say in the next 50 seconds, now's your time. Bing, were you able to find that document?
Yeah, I sent it to Evan and Amy. I'm not
Okay.
sure who was collecting them, but
Yeah. Okay, good.
maybe you can flip it open in the last few seconds and post the numbers.
Or maybe she can pull it up in the main plenary. Yeah, that might be a good opportunity there.
Close on some good news.
Yeah, finally. Sounds like it.
Yeah.
All right, we'll see you in the main plenary, everyone. Thank you for your feedback today.